The fishing boat moved slowly across the wide Pacific Ocean as the early morning light spread across the water. The sea looked calm, almost peaceful, with small waves touching the sides of the boat. For the crew, this was a normal day, just like many others before. They had been fishing these waters for years and knew the ocean well. Harris, the captain, stood near the wheel, watching the horizon. He was a careful man who trusted experience more than luck. Beside him, Tom checked the nets, while Ben and Leo worked near the back of the boat. The air smelled of salt and fuel, and the sound of the engine filled the quiet morning. Below the deck, a sonar machine sent steady signals into the deep water. Ben was asked to keep an eye on it while the others worked. At first, the screen showed nothing unusual, just the normal shapes of rocks and uneven ground. Ben leaned back in his chair, relaxed and calm. Suddenly, the screen showed a large shape that made Ben sit upright. It was long and smooth, unlike the rough shapes of rocks. He leaned closer, adjusting the settings to be sure. The shape remained clear and solid. His heart began to beat faster. Ben called out to the others, telling them to come and look. Tom wiped his hands and walked over, followed by Leo. Harris stepped down from the wheel and stared at the screen in silence. The shape looked unnatural, almost too perfect to be part of the ocean floor. Harris slowly nodded and said it looked like something man-made. The crew fell quiet as the idea settled in their minds. Ben pointed at the long sides and the narrow middle. Leo said it looked like wings. No one wanted to say the word at first. After a long moment, Harris spoke and said it might be an aircraft. The words felt heavy in the air. An aircraft at the bottom of the ocean was not something they expected to find during a fishing trip. Tom felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. They talked quietly about what to do next. Harris reminded them that curiosity could be dangerous, but he also knew such a discovery was rare. The crew agreed to mark the location and take a closer look. They had lifting equipment on board, usually used for heavy nets and lost gear. As the boat slowed, the crew prepared the cables and hooks. Each man worked carefully, aware that one mistake could be costly. The ocean remained calm, but tension grew on the deck. Ben felt his hands shake slightly as he secured a cable. The sonar confirmed the object was resting deep but stable. Harris gave the signal to lower the cables. The metal lines slid into the water, disappearing into the dark blue below. Everyone watched closely as the lines sank. Minutes passed slowly. The cables reached the object, and the crew carefully guided them around the shape. It was difficult work, done mostly by feel and guess. Harris kept his voice steady as he gave instructions. Once the cables were secured, Harris ordered the winch to start pulling. The engine strained as the winch groaned loudly. The cables tightened, and the boat rocked slightly. The ocean resisted, holding on to whatever rested below. Tom watched the water closely, his eyes fixed on the spot where the object would surface. Leo stood beside him, silent and focused. Ben held his breath, worried the cables might snap under the weight. Slowly, bubbles began to rise. The water darkened, and a shadow appeared beneath the surface. The crew leaned forward as rusted metal broke through the waves. A large shape emerged, dripping water and covered in sea growth. It was a plane. The body was old and damaged, its surface eaten away by salt and time. Parts of the wings were bent, and the paint was almost gone. Seaweed clung to the metal, and rust stains marked every surface. The crew stood still, stunned by the sight. Harris whispered that it must have been there for many years. No one argued. The plane looked like it belonged to another time. The ocean had kept it hidden, preserving its secret in silence. As the winch pulled the plane closer, the crew noticed the windows. They were cloudy, but still intact. Tom felt uneasy, imagining what the plane must have looked like before it sank. Ben felt a chill as he realized this was not just a piece of metal, but part of a story. The plane was secured against the side of the boat. Water poured from its open seams, and the smell of rust filled the air. The ocean grew quiet again, as if nothing had happened. Leo noticed something that made him step back. One of the doors looked closed tight. It was not broken open like the others. It looked sealed, as if someone had locked it from the inside long ago. The crew gathered near the door, careful not to touch it yet. Harris told them to stay calm and think clearly. Whatever was inside the plane had been protected from the ocean all these years. Ben wondered who had been on the plane and what had happened to them. Tom felt a deep sadness mixed with fear. The ocean had returned the plane, but it had not yet revealed its full story. As the sun climbed higher, the crew stood beside the old aircraft in silence. They knew this discovery was far bigger than fishing nets and daily work. The plane carried a mystery that was about to change everything they thought they knew. This was only the beginning. The crew stood quietly around the old plane as the boat drifted gently on the calm Pacific Ocean. The morning sun reflected off the wet metal, making the rusted surface shine in a strange way. No one rushed to speak or move. The silence felt heavy, as if the plane itself demanded respect. Harris was the first to step closer. He placed his hand on the cold metal and felt the rough surface beneath his fingers. Years underwater had changed the plane, but it was still strong enough to hold its shape. He reminded the crew to stay calm and careful. Tom walked slowly along the side of the aircraft, studying the damaged wing. He noticed deep scratches and bent metal, signs that the plane had hit the water with force. His mind tried to imagine the moment it went down, but the answers stayed locked in the past. Ben stood near the sealed door, unable to take his eyes off it. Unlike the rest of the plane, this door looked untouched. The handle was still in place, and the frame showed little damage. It felt wrong, like something waiting to be opened. Leo suggested they check the outside first before opening anything. Harris agreed and told everyone to inspect the plane carefully. They moved slowly, checking the wings, tail, and underside. Every detail added to the mystery. Near the tail, Tom noticed faded markings on the metal. Most of the paint was gone, but a few letters were still visible. They were old and worn, but clearly marked by careful hands long ago. Harris took note of them, knowing they could be important later. The crew returned to the door as the boat remained steady. Harris explained that opening it without care could be risky. The plane had been underwater for many years, and they did not know what condition it was in. Still, curiosity pushed them forward. Ben carefully wiped away dirt and sea growth from the handle. His hands shook slightly as he tried to turn it. At first, it did not move. He stopped and looked at Harris, waiting for guidance. Harris nodded and told him to try again slowly. Ben applied steady pressure, and with a soft sound, the handle moved. The door shifted just enough to release trapped air. A low hiss escaped from inside the plane. Everyone stepped back for a moment. The sound faded, and nothing else happened. Harris waited, watching for any sign of danger. When the air cleared, he gave the signal to open the door fully. Tom and Leo helped Ben pull the door open. It creaked loudly, protesting after years of silence. Inside, the space looked dark and untouched. The crew leaned closer, trying to see inside without stepping in. The inside of the plane was cleaner than expected. The water had not filled it completely. Rows of seats lined the narrow space, covered in dust and time. The floor was dry in places, protected by the sealed door. Ben shined a light inside, revealing more details. Bags rested under some seats, still in place. Papers lay scattered on the floor, yellowed but readable. It looked as if time had stopped the moment the plane sank. Tom noticed something that made him pause. One seat near the middle was still upright, and a seatbelt was fastened. It looked as if someone had been sitting there, waiting. Harris felt a strange sense of unease. He reminded everyone to stay respectful. Whatever happened on this plane was not just history. It was part of someone's life. As they moved deeper inside, Leo spotted a small metal case near the front. It was scratched but sealed tight. Harris carefully lifted it, surprised by its weight. He placed it on a clean surface near the door. Ben continued to look around, his light catching a set of faded photos tucked into a seat pocket. He picked them up carefully. The images showed smiling people standing near a plane, unaware of what the future held. Tom felt a deep sadness as he studied the photos. These were real people, with hopes and plans that ended here. The ocean had kept their story hidden for many years. Harris opened the metal case slowly. Inside were papers wrapped in cloth. The writing was old but clear. He did not read them aloud yet, choosing to protect their meaning until they could be examined properly. Suddenly, Leo pointed toward the back of the plane. A small door leading to another section was slightly open. It had been hidden by shadows and fallen items. The discovery made everyone freeze. Harris moved closer and pushed the door open gently. Behind it was a narrow space, darker and colder. Ben aimed his light inside, revealing something unexpected. There was a wooden crate secured to the floor. It looked out of place, different from everything else inside the plane. The wood was strong and sealed with metal locks. Tom asked why a crate like that would be on a passenger plane. Harris did not answer right away. His mind raced with questions. The crate suggested the plane carried more than just people. The crew agreed not to open the crate yet. They knew this discovery was growing bigger than they first imagined. What started as a fishing trip had turned into something far more serious. As the sun moved higher in the sky, the crew stood inside the old plane, surrounded by secrets. The ocean had given up part of its story, but much remained hidden. They all felt it. Whatever was inside that crate would change everything. The crew gathered around the wooden crate inside the plane, each man feeling the weight of the moment. The narrow space felt smaller now, filled with questions and quiet tension. The crate rested firmly on the floor, secured with metal locks that showed little damage from time or water. Harris took a slow breath and reminded everyone to stay calm. He knew that rushing could lead to mistakes. The plane had waited many years to be found, and whatever it carried deserved care and patience. Tom nodded, agreeing that they needed to think clearly. Ben circled the crate, shining his light along the edges. The wood was thick and well built, not like something made in a hurry. Faded markings were carved into one side, worn but still visible. They looked official, not random. Leo pointed out that the crate was tied down with care, as if it had been very important. Tom wondered aloud why such a crate would be placed on a plane that looked small and old. The question stayed unanswered, hanging in the air. Harris decided they should move the crate closer to the door where there was more light and space. Together, they worked slowly, lifting and sliding it across the floor. It was heavier than it looked, which only added to the mystery. Once the crate was near the open door, the crew stepped back. Harris examined the locks carefully. They were rusted but still intact. He told Ben to bring a small tool to help open them gently. Ben handed over the tool, his hands steady but his face tense. Harris worked carefully, loosening the first lock with slow pressure. The metal gave way with a soft sound. One by one, the locks were released. The lid did not open right away. Harris paused, then lifted it slowly. The wood creaked, breaking a silence that had lasted for years. Inside, the crate was lined with thick padding that had kept its contents dry. Tom leaned closer, his eyes wide. Inside were several sealed boxes, neatly arranged and marked with faded labels. The writing was old, but still readable. It showed dates and locations from many decades ago. Ben felt confused. The boxes looked official, like they belonged to an important shipment. Leo asked if it could be equipment or documents. Harris did not answer at first, choosing to inspect one box more closely. Harris lifted a box and felt its weight. It was lighter than expected. He opened it carefully and found stacks of paper inside, wrapped tightly to protect them. The papers were clean, untouched by water or damage. Tom picked up a sheet and scanned it slowly. The words were technical and detailed, written in a careful hand. He realized they were reports, filled with notes and drawings. The meaning was not clear yet, but they felt important. Ben opened another box and found more papers, along with a small metal object. It was smooth and carefully shaped, unlike anything he had seen before. He handed it to Harris, who studied it closely. Harris felt a chill. The object did not look dangerous, but it felt significant. He said quietly that this plane was not just carrying passengers. It had been transporting something valuable and secret. Leo looked around the cabin again, noticing how calm and untouched everything felt. It was as if the plane had been hidden on purpose. The sealed door, the protected crate, and the preserved papers all pointed to careful planning. Tom wondered if the plane had been lost by accident or hidden on purpose. The thought made his chest feel heavy. Harris shared the same concern. He said some stories were buried because they were meant to stay hidden. The crew decided to stop and document everything they had found. Harris took photos and notes, making sure nothing was disturbed further. He knew they would need help understanding what they had uncovered. Ben stepped outside the plane to breathe fresh air. The ocean stretched endlessly around them, calm and quiet. It was hard to believe that such a secret had been resting beneath these waters. When Ben returned, Tom was holding one of the photos found earlier. He studied the faces carefully. One person in the photo stood beside the plane, smiling with confidence. Tom felt a strange connection to that unknown person. Leo suggested they check the cockpit next. Harris agreed, and they moved forward carefully. The controls were old but intact, frozen in place as if waiting for the pilot to return. Ben noticed that the fuel gauges were low. Harris pointed out that it could explain why the plane went down. But it did not explain the secret cargo or why it had been protected so carefully. As the sun began to move west, the crew felt the weight of time pressing on them. They knew they could not keep this discovery to themselves. It was too big and too important. Harris told the crew they would secure the plane and return to shore. Experts would need to examine everything properly. Tom felt relief mixed with worry. The mystery was growing, not shrinking. Before leaving, Ben looked back at the crate and the papers one last time. He felt certain that the truth behind this plane would surprise many people. The ocean had kept its secret for years. Now it had begun to speak, and the world was about to listen. The fishing boat moved slowly toward the shore as the sun lowered in the sky. The old plane remained secured alongside the vessel, wrapped in ropes and watched carefully by the crew. No one spoke much during the journey. Each man was lost in his own thoughts, replaying everything they had seen inside the aircraft. Harris kept his eyes on the water and the distant land ahead. He knew the moment they reached shore, things would change. This discovery was no longer just theirs. It would soon belong to many others who would ask questions and demand answers. When the boat finally reached the dock, the crew was surprised to see several people waiting. News had traveled faster than expected. A few local officials stood nearby, along with port workers who stared in shock at the rusted plane. Harris stepped forward and explained the situation calmly. He showed them the markings, the sealed door, and spoke about the crate found inside. His voice remained steady, but everyone could hear the seriousness in his words. The plane was carefully lifted onto a secure platform. Workers moved slowly, making sure nothing was damaged further. The crew stayed close, guiding each step and watching every movement. Tom felt protective, as if the plane was now part of his life. Soon, experts arrived. They were careful and quiet, studying the plane from the outside before entering. They wore gloves and carried tools designed for fragile discoveries. Ben watched closely, worried something might be missed or mishandled. Inside the plane, the experts examined the seats, papers, and photos. They took notes and spoke in low voices. One of them paused at the crate and looked at Harris with interest. Harris explained how they found it and why they stopped opening further items. The crate was moved into a secure room nearby. The papers and metal object were placed on a clean table under bright lights. The experts studied the writing carefully, comparing dates and markings. Their expressions grew more serious with each page. Tom stood near the doorway, watching their faces. He could tell they were surprised. Whatever these documents were, they carried weight. Ben felt both proud and nervous, knowing their simple fishing trip had led to this moment. Later that evening, Harris and the crew were asked to sit together while the experts shared what they could. They explained that the plane dated back many decades. It had vanished during a time of great global tension, carrying information that was never meant to disappear. The papers appeared to be research reports and records of important planning. They were not dangerous, but they were valuable. They showed ideas and designs that were far ahead of their time. That explained why they had been protected so carefully. The metal object was explained as a prototype tool, one that never reached public use. It was not harmful, but it showed advanced thinking for its era. Ben felt amazed that such progress had been hidden underwater for so long. Leo asked why the plane was never recovered. One expert explained that the plane was listed as lost, with its location unknown. Search efforts ended long ago, and its true mission was kept quiet. Tom felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. The mystery was becoming clearer, but it also showed how much had been hidden. The people on that plane were part of something important, yet their story was forgotten. As night fell, the crew was allowed to rest. They stayed in a nearby building, unable to sleep easily. Every sound reminded them of the day's events. Ben stared at the ceiling, thinking about the photos and the faces in them. The next morning, news crews arrived. Cameras pointed toward the dock, and reporters spoke excitedly. Harris gathered the crew and reminded them to speak carefully. He wanted the truth to come out, but without confusion or fear. When asked, Harris shared the story simply. A fishing crew found an old plane. Inside were preserved items that told a forgotten story. He avoided guessing or adding drama. He believed the facts were powerful enough. Experts continued their work, slowly releasing information to the public. They confirmed the plane's origin and explained its purpose in clear terms. The story spread quickly, capturing attention around the world. Tom watched people read the news on their phones, pointing at images of the plane. He felt proud but also humbled. They had not gone looking for fame. They had only followed curiosity and care. Ben returned to the dock alone later that day. He looked out at the ocean, calm and endless. Somewhere beneath the waves, countless stories still rested in silence. He wondered how many more secrets waited to be found. Harris joined him and placed a hand on his shoulder. He said some discoveries happened to remind people of the past, and some happened to teach patience and respect. Ben nodded, understanding more than words could say. The plane had been hidden for decades, but now its story was alive again. It reminded everyone that time does not erase truth. It only waits for the right moment to return it. For the crew, life would slowly return to normal. They would fish again, laugh again, and face the ocean as they always had. But none of them would ever forget the day the sea gave back a forgotten chapter of history. And one part of the story still remained unanswered. The final meaning of the papers, and the reason this plane took its last journey, were still being studied. The truth was close. The days that followed were busy and filled with questions. The discovery of the old plane had spread across the world, and people everywhere wanted to know the full story. Experts worked carefully, taking their time to understand every paper and object recovered from inside the aircraft. Harris and his crew were invited back several times to answer questions. They spoke honestly about what they found and how they felt. None of them tried to add drama. They believed the truth was meaningful enough on its own. As the research continued, the experts finally reached clear answers. The papers inside the crate were part of an early project meant to improve travel safety and navigation. The ideas were new for their time and far ahead of what most people knew then. The plane had been carrying this work to another location for review. The metal object was part of the same project. It was a testing device, created to support those ideas. The project was important, but it was not harmful. It was meant to help people travel more safely in the future. Tom felt relief when he heard this. He had worried that the discovery might bring fear or trouble. Instead, it brought understanding. The plane had carried hope, not danger. The experts also learned why the plane was never recovered. A sudden fuel issue caused it to land on the ocean. The pilot had managed a controlled landing, allowing the cabin to stay mostly sealed. The crew on board had been rescued later, but the plane itself sank before help could arrive. This explained the condition of the inside. The seats, papers, and crate were left behind in a hurry. The rescue focused on saving lives, not equipment. Over time, the exact location of the plane was lost. Ben felt a deep sense of respect for the people who had been on that plane. They survived, but their work disappeared into the sea. Now, decades later, that work had returned. The photos found inside were shared with families connected to the project. Some recognized faces from old stories and records. There were moments of quiet emotion as people realized how close their history had been to being lost forever. The plane was placed in a secure museum area, where it could be preserved. Visitors were allowed to see it, along with displays explaining its story. The focus was on learning, not excitement. Leo visited the museum one afternoon, standing silently in front of the aircraft. He remembered the moment it broke through the water surface. Seeing it now, clean and supported, felt unreal. Harris and the crew were thanked publicly for their care and honesty. They received recognition for protecting the discovery and reporting it responsibly. Harris accepted the thanks with humility, saying the ocean deserved just as much respect. Tom returned to fishing not long after. Life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. The sea still stretched wide and calm, just as it always had. But Tom now felt a deeper connection to it. Ben kept thinking about how chance had guided them. A simple sonar signal had led to a forgotten story returning to the world. He realized that even ordinary days could carry something extraordinary. One evening, the crew gathered on the boat as the sun set. They shared quiet laughs and simple food, enjoying the calm water. No one needed to speak about the plane. They all carried the memory inside. Harris looked at his crew with pride. He said that doing the right thing mattered more than fame or reward. The crew agreed. They had followed respect and patience, and it led to something meaningful. As months passed, the story slowly faded from daily news. New events took attention, as they always do. But the plane remained, steady and preserved, a reminder of the past. Visitors continued to learn from it. Students read about the project. Families saw the photos. The story became part of history again, no longer hidden. Ben visited the ocean one last time near the place where they found the plane. The water moved gently, unchanged by everything it had given back. He understood that the sea holds many stories, sharing them only when the time is right. He smiled softly, grateful to be part of one of those moments. Not everyone gets to help history speak again. The fishing crew returned to their work, carrying nets instead of questions. But each time the sonar pulsed beneath their boat, they listened a little more closely. The ocean was quiet, but it was never empty. And somewhere deep below, other forgotten stories waited patiently for their turn.